Thank goodness. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, November 12th Council Chamber for a regular meeting. Call to order. Just want to announce and uh, convey our condolences to the Horgan family for the passing of past Premier John Horgan, who I met several times and had several good conversations with, and was a really pleasant man to deal with. And fortunately, he passed away today, and just would like us all to just acknowledge the fact that we send out our prayers and thoughts to the family, and he was a good man. So thank you. I'm not sure when they're going to have their ceremony and stuff, but I think that will be released soon. Public input. Seal? Public input? Any public input?
There is no public input.
Thank you. 4.1, adoption of minutes, regular council meeting minutes, October 22nd, 2024. Recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting held October 22nd, 2024 be adopted. Councillor Ogan, Councillor Egan. Any errors or omissions? Councillor Charney. All those in favor? Opposed? We passed. Thank goodness. Public hearing, no public hearing. General matters. Delegations recognition, Samaritan's Purse, presentation by Miss Sherry Peterson and Miss Bobby Jo LaBelle from Samaritan's Purse. Come on up and hit that microphone, get the red light going, and I'll get you guys live. There we go. You are off. There we go.
All right. We're good? Okay. So good evening and thank you, Mayor Getz and Council for making time for us to share our story with you guys. In November of 2021, Samaritan's Purse arrived in Marriott to provide initial disaster relief through mud outs and debris and mold removal. Ooh, I'm kind of nervous here. Sorry. By March of 2022, Samaritan's Purse continued their response by hiring long-term recovery specialists to continue to provide support to the community as it is being healed. So my name is Bobby Jo LaBelle, and along with me, my colleague, Sherry Peterson, and we are your recovery specialists. Thanks, Bobby. Oh, where's the... So... There we go. I'll learn.
Oh, you went two.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you went three. There we go.
No, one more. You know what? This is why they don't let me play with electronics. Well, here you see it, though, and I'm looking over here. This is Samaritan's Purse tetrahedron of holistic care. And you'll notice here that it identifies two key functions of care that we presume to provide for the community. That number one is providing case management. You'll notice in the center of that tetrahedron, there's a tiny white circle. Tiny is a diminutive word because honestly, we're here to help individuals. That's one of our key functions. And by providing trauma-informed psychosocial support, lending a listening ear, and just helping them with resources, we can provide proper care for folks as they recover in this instant. Now, the second function that we try and work towards is always building resiliency through increasing social capital, which is the strategic connections that we have worked to build. So by encouraging positive connections between individuals and groups in the community, such as local churches, local authorities, community organizations, and civic society, this is the way in which we hope to grow the needed trust, social cohesion, and inclusion that we have learned. It encourages collective cooperation, communication, and the action, which inevitably fosters effective community recovery and builds the resiliency that this is all about. So I'm just going to pass this back to Bobby. There's a way of it. Is it missing batteries, Linda? There we go. Okay.
Turn it again.
Uh-oh.
So
But that's what it is. I'll be patient.
there you go. Yeah. Remember, wait. So as long-term recovery specialists, we come to offer the gift of just being there. So coming alongside the flood affected individuals and families in their recovery by helping them to identify their physical, emotional, spiritual, and economic needs. Understanding these needs, we help to make connections with local faith communities that can support, strengthen, and provide significant recovery resources for the people. We also encourage collaboration with local businesses like City Furniture, Home Hardware, and social supports like Ask Wellness, the Soup Bowl, and legal advocacy, and more. So in a nutshell, we are working to build social capital in these connections. And because ultimately, the end goal is to encourage self-reliant function of the disaster-affected community like Merritt. You're in charge. Give me a try.
Yeah, I'll give you a try. She's got the magic touch. Maybe not. Okay. There we go. Yeah. Anyways, I want to continue on in our presentation by talking about what it is we feel we've accomplished. Now, before I get too far, I want to let you know that you had a team of recovery specialists working here in Merritt since the flood. There have been 3 of us. So I want to give a quick shout out to my colleague, Megan Blackmore, who is now Mrs. Logan. And she was the first recovery specialist who was on the ground in our resiliency center when it first was opened in the early months of the recovery. And she honestly did provide a huge gift in helping the community heal in that first year and a bit. And I just want to make sure I gave her a shout out. So that said, our original scope in our project was to assist approximately 250 individuals. We're pleased to report that we actually helped about 340 individuals, 77 of which we did long-term involvement with, which means we met with them on more than one occasion. And in some instances, we met with them for months and at least one more than a year. We had 103 referrals out of those. And this was important when our resources were not what they needed to be able to connect them where they needed to go so they could continue in their recovery process. We partnered with the temporary housing team, which was a gift in supporting individuals as they moved and transitioned. We sat in for Merritt's recovery team meetings from time to time, and Sean Strang has been a wonderful gift in teaching us more about community recovery and emergency management. We collaborated with Red Cross caseworkers, and with other government agencies as well.
We also connected churches to businesses, and we're going to explain a little bit more on that in a minute. We also connected churches with residents, churches with residents. So while Samaritan's Purse does not do rebuilds, not here in Canada anyways, there were instances where Kamloops Presbyterian Church and the Reformed Church of North America in Chilliwack paid for needed home repair materials. So let's talk a little bit more about our 7 champion churches and 3 hero businesses that helped create a stronger community. We had the honor of working with 5 local churches, and those churches are the Nicola Valley Evangelical Free Church, the Merritt Baptist Church, St. Michael's Anglican Church, Merritt Crossroads Community Church, and Merritt Seventh-day Adventist Church. All 5 of these churches helped in so many different ways, in their own unique ways. But I just want to highlight the amazing volunteers from these churches. The other 2 churches, St. Andrew's Presbyterian from Kamloops and the Reformed Church of North America from Chilliwack. These 2 churches generously, and I mean generously, paid for items which would have posed to be a massive barrier to recovery for many of our residents. And again, you're going to hear a little bit more about that in just a few moments.
Thanks, Bobby. So I want to highlight the businesses that we collaborated with as well. And we call them our local business heroes. They were there to meet the needs of the community when they needed it most. It was at Merritt's Walmart that residents were able to purchase essential household items that were lost in the flood. Sometimes they needed these. They were often in hotels and such, and so they had nothing left by the time they needed to move. So they were able to purchase these things at Walmart, things like linens, bedding, dishes, toasters, and all this with the funds that were provided by the Reformed Church in North America in Chilliwack. City Furniture was another amazing business collaboration that we're grateful for because they were able to meet the needs of residents in a real personal and powerful way. I recall that they were able to hold on to sale prices of items that were needed even a week after the sale had closed. And they did this for flood impacted residents and then went an extra step and provided free delivery of these items for people who needed things like a couch or a bed. And so this was a huge gift. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our friends at Home Hardware as well. They really hit the nail on the head there. When the residents needed quotes for building supplies, they were quick and efficient. And they became wonderful friends of the folks at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Kamloops, because it was St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church who paid for the needed building supplies like drywall, insulation, and other things, so that residents in need could get what they needed and do simple repairs, because we all know that sometimes even contractors were difficult to find. All of these community connections were vital to the recovery of residents who had exhausted all other means of support. And for that, we're grateful.
Okay. So we had over 890 volunteers. 890. We could not have done this without partnering with our volunteers. So 875 volunteers came into our initial mud out response in 2021 and 2022. Now, these volunteers came from BC and across Canada. And 15 more local volunteers gladly responded to the call when a few households needed some more extra help in 2023 and 2024.
So I just have to say it. We're a little quick there, but that's okay. We're not going to touch that slide yet, but I like that you're teasing these guys because we're going to talk about that in a minute. So thank God for our amazing Merit volunteers. How can you not talk about it? There's 890 of them, and some of them are locals. And that's community capacity. That's amazing. So these volunteers, as Bobby said, came from various churches to do minor handyman jobs. They were never asked to do contractor work. That would have been foolishness. So some of these volunteers did things like installing drywall and insulation. You can see in our center picture there's an older couple and they had some health concerns. This group of volunteers came in and literally revamped their basement. There was things they couldn't do. There was fence repair work that needed to be done in another individual's yard. And lo and behold, one of the volunteers in town actually volunteered with Mennonite Disaster Services. So not only did they have the expertise, they had the tools to do it. And those fence posts went in real fast. One church brought a youth group to help a senior who needed yard work done and couldn't physically do it. All these little things done with great compassion catapulted many residents into new hope and great courage. Now we.
A smile does say it all, doesn't it? So we have Felicia. We're just going to tell you a few stories here. So Felicia just bought her home a few weeks before the flood hit. The damage forced her to temporarily relocate with family on the coast. So in order for her to come home and continue to repair and rebuild, she needed a working bathroom. So in this first picture, you see Felicia standing there with a huge grin beside a member of the St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Kamloops. And he had bought and delivered to her on behalf of the church a toilet, a vanity, a sink, and a few other things. Next picture, Jack and Florence. What a wonderful couple. They are a retired senior couple who, at the time of this flood, they spent all their savings for a mud out. They spent thousands of dollars, and they simply had no idea that help was on the way and it was free. So by connecting these lovely folks to the churches, they were able to finally get the drywall and insulation done. Their recovery got rebooted.
Yeah. I love telling these stories. These are just a few, but we only had a few minutes. So you'll see the third picture. Randy, he's giving you the thumbs up here, and he's got a great big smile. If you'll notice in the picture, you can see where the water had damaged his basement walls right up to almost head height. And he wasn't able to repair the flooring or finish the work on the walls until he could secure a door that wouldn't allow rain to impede that process. And he was waiting on funding. Things are moving as slow as they do in recovery. But by connecting him with one of the other churches, it was the Reformed Church of North America in Chilliwack that paid for Randy's door. They paid Home Hardware here in town. And Randy had the door, and he was able to move forward on his recovery. Our last picture, love that grin. That's our friend Bill. Now, Bill's home was massively devastated by the flood. There was flooring and wall damage with mold and otherwise, and he didn't have the funds to fix this. He was, of course, not insured. But a team from Samaritan's Purse who did some of the original mud outs came, which was unusual, but they came back for Bill. And they helped with partnering with local residents to put some flooring planks in his home so that it was safe. They did some mold remediation like they did in the other homes, and they created a safe space for Bill to return to. In order to do this, they had to move everything off the floor. So you see a picture here of Bill sitting on his bed because it was finally back and the place was safe and he could breathe in it. And you couldn't get that smile off of Bill's face. It was so awesome. So I guess it's my turn. We'll continue here just real quickly talking about lessons learned, and we'll just touch on a few of them. Thanks, Linda. So yeah, there you go. So one of the things that we learned in the process of providing recovery assistance was that there were folks that required help in navigating technology, absolutely. And oftentimes they were seniors who didn't have or didn't know how to use electronics for communication. So there were times where Bobby and I would have to facilitate online meetings for these folks and other NGOs by bringing them to our office and helping them connect with either a Zoom call or otherwise, so that they could complete the needed documentation and feel a part of their recovery process. Rural residents also were an issue that we felt there's a possible gap there. In communities that were surrounding Merritt along Highway 8 and in our First Nations communities, we noticed that there was becoming some hint of social barriers developing when folks would say things to us like, well, they got help and how come we didn't? Now, we all know that people see things from different perspectives, but the point being this was how they perceived what was going on. So there could be possible growth area in reaching the rural residents in the same manner in which we were able to help the ones in town. I'm going to let Bobby take it from here.
So lack of social capital and limited assets. So believe it or not, there were folks who had no idea where to get help and that there was even help being offered. And these people, most of them, like they would live off grid or close to it, people who were isolated, limited contact with others. Some people we found that they thought they had to be only church members in order to get these helps with their mud outs. And some were unaware of even DFA or even how to navigate an appeal. And for these people, these are the reason why we come.
So we're just wrapping up here with a couple of final comments. But we do have a hope for Merritt's future. As you probably are aware, our contract for assisting in our present role ends in December. but we know that there's more. So I want to begin by mentioning that we have worked on an asset-based community development strategy wherein Bobby and I were able to complete some asset mapping with our local churches. So we actually helped them to identify some of their physical as well as human resource assets that could be deployed in times of emergency or disaster. Now, that information has been plotted onto an Excel spreadsheet and is going to be shared with our emergency management coordinator, Adam Hart. It's our hope that he now would have more resource to pull on in times of emergency or disaster. And I will also let you know that Samaritan's Purse will be offering additional training programs for churches on emergency preparedness and in growing future resiliency. So, Bobby.
And our hope for the future includes the continued partnership with local churches and the emergency management coordinator, and the ongoing development of social capital between business and residents. And that both would increase the community capacity and long-term resilience of the city of Merritt.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we wanted to leave you with a quote by a well-known author who I feel actually really does resonate why it is that Samaritan's Purse came and what we had hoped to accomplish. And Helen Keller wrote these words. She says, alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much. It's been our honor to serve in this community as recovery specialists. And at this point, we'll open this to questions if you have any. But thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Sherry and Bobby. Any questions from Councilor Charney?
I'd just like to thank you and your organization for all you did. You're just invaluable. And I think that the community appreciates everything you did. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Brogan.
Yeah, so thank you so much for the presentation. So it is a good reminder of all the work done in our community. What an impressive work. My only question is, what does the communication look like between the Samaritan Purse and the different churches? I noticed that only 4 churches as well as only 3 local businesses helped in this process. So was the communication for all the churches and only these 3 churches responded, or how that was that? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Do you want me to do that? Yeah, go ahead. So we did reach out to all of the churches when we first arrived and tried to build rapport with them. Now, not making excuse or anything, but there are some churches whose leadership don't live here and others who just weren't able to connect. So invariably, we ended up building rapport with those particular churches. Not that we didn't reach out to all of them. Those were the ones that we were able to build rapport with. And with regard to the 3 businesses, those were the ones that were key in the needs as they arose. Then we had to look into the community to find connections to fill those gaps. And those 3 businesses were stellar. So that's just how that worked out.
Councilor Egan.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with the other people's remarks about how invaluable that your service has been in our community. And I just wanted to know, like you keep saying that there's still more work to be done, but could you estimate how much more? I mean, how many families or homeowners have you helped? And then what would you estimate that the numbers might be in the future?
So this is almost the impossible question, and I love you, Dana, for asking that. Yeah, so Bobby's going, we helped 340, but we do know that there are some who, even when we were reaching out, they felt like we can do this on our own. And it's the experience of Samaritan's Purse that it does take time before others will maybe say, I tried this, it didn't work, I actually need help now. And the reality is there's more to recovery than just rebuilds. So we're aware that emergency preparedness, connecting, building strategic community would also be helpful. When you're asking numbers of households, I think that's something I'd like to be referring to Adam Hart or even our Chief Administrative Officer, Cynthia White, because she might know a little bit more about that than we do. But suffice it to say, if there's a need and there's a willingness to have us back, man, we'd be happy to support. So
I was just thinking, yeah, like you say, there's so much more work to be done. Do you see this as, your community organization being set up here permanently?
No. Did you want to tell them why?
We're supposed to work ourselves out of a job.
So, yeah, Bobby's absolutely right. So Samaritan's Purse is an international disaster relief organization, and our key goal, and she mentioned it earlier, was to see the community developing in a way that they can be self-sufficient. So training them, even with things that we were able to do when we first came in, even through mud outs and mold remediation. There is opportunity, I think, coming in the spring where one of our other team members may come back with some teaching so that rather than waiting for Samaritan's Purse to come in, bring the resources and teaching so now this can be multiplied mass quickly because we already know that there's so many natural disasters and emergencies happening simultaneously. Sometimes it's hard to get there. Some of our Canadian team is in North Carolina right now. So they're just, and in Florida. So just giving you an idea, we need to multiply the gift within each community because communities that heal together have resiliency together, and that's where it goes.
Okay, so then you said you had 890 people that actually came from all over everywhere to come to Merritt, and that 15 of those, because you said 875 were from out of the city.
Right.
15 of those were local. Aside from the businesses.
Actually 15 and we kind of, I wanted to stress that 15 came out after the original 875. So out of the 875, there was probably some from Merritt.
Here, the original.
But I didn't get those numbers. But 15 was when we actually put out a call in 2023 and saying, hey, we need some volunteers. Anybody want to come and help us because we have some homeowners that needed more assistance.
Yeah.
And so we put it out on Facebook, we put it on the radio and in the newspaper, but all 15 of those came from sign-up sheets with churches.
Okay.
So the original 875 would have been people both locally and across Canada that came during the original mud out. And so that number was derived through work orders that our team made us aware of. So we're just building. There's more to do.
Well, you do amazing work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Egan.
Councillor Petrosi.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you for all your hard work and your presentation and seeing Jack and Randy, because I know both of them and their wives are super people, super people. Are. And then photos of your volunteers. I know them too. So just great job, everybody. And you know, they go about their business. They don't want a pat on the back. They just go about their business and help out. So great job.
That's love, right?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
So one thing that Sherry and Bobby are not telling you is that they were, you know, there was a lot of work done during the flood, but after the flood, there was a lot of emotional trauma that still is in the valley and still is working through. So one of the things that with their support, I've phoned their supervisors, their boss, to see if we could extend the contract. So we've asked for that, and he's looking into it to see if they can stay because we still have to deal with. We still have 20 somewhat properties, people that need to be bought out. And at some point, they're going to have to face the fact that that's going to happen. And we need somebody here for that. And we also need other things. So I canvassed Bobby and Sherry asking what would be the best thing. And they said if we could place a phone call. So I've done that twice and I'll probably do it again. I'd like to say they're seriously considering it, but who knows? But at least we'll continue to try because I don't think your work here is done yet. So. And they do occasionally come into the office and pray for all of us. And it's nice that they do. I appreciate it. And yeah, we certainly appreciate all the work you did. It was a very tough time. And I used Samaritan's Purse to get my old furnace out of my basement because I tried to get it out myself and I almost killed myself. So
yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that, man.
So it was nice to have that happen. So thank you very much. And hopefully we can make all of that work.
We'll keep on chatting. Thank you again for your time tonight. Blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
You know, one thing I did miss, and I probably should do it, is I missed the land acknowledgement. Sorry about that. I'm going to go back and do that. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Inkcup and Soak people. Sorry for missing that. 6.2, Nicola Foreshore, presentation by Ms. Georgia Peck and Mr. Brian Holmes, and I think they are joining us online. So we'll turn it over to who's ever going to speak, Brian or George. You guys take it, and you're off. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen. It looks like I haven't been given screen sharing abilities yet. Perfect, thank you. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Wonderful. Brian, I'm happy to kick things off and we can go about things as usual.
Sure. Can I just say, I just introduced myself. I'm Brian Holmes. I'm a council member from the Upper Nicola Band, Chieftain Council. Been on council for about 15 years up in the Douglas Lake area. Just wanted to note, Mayor, your recognition of Premier Horgan. He was one of the only leaders that I'm aware of that has come into our community on a good note and spent time in our community. And it's a great loss. When he did shift away back when he was earlier, and to hear the news today is quite unfortunate, especially on the heels of Senator Murray Sinclair as well. So it's a tough time for that those heroes and those leaders within our province to depart us, but leave us with some great wisdom and leadership. Okay, Georgia.
Thanks for that, Brian. Okay, wonderful. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for having Brian and myself tonight to share a little bit about a project that we've been working on for the past couple of years. The purpose of our presentation today is mainly informative. We will be sharing a project that we've been working on since 2023, which revolved around the resurvey of the shoreline of Nicola Lake. Brian and I worked together on this project to, for the first time in one of these shoreline surveys, align Indigenous knowledge with Western science. And we are going to go through some of the results of this survey, as well as share the process that we took and the reasons why we did this work. So before I go any further, I would also like to recognize that Living Lakes Canada, the organization that I am representing, prioritizes reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. We commit to respecting the rights of Indigenous peoples by aligning our work with the goals of local Indigenous groups. We recognize the role and the responsibility that Indigenous peoples have to all land and the water that flows through it, and we honor that relationship by uplifting voices within water stewardship. So I'll quickly just introduce myself and my role in the project, and then I'll pass it on to Brian for his role in the work that we've done as well. So again, my name is Georgia Peck. I am the Lakes Program Manager with an environmental nonprofit called Living Lakes Canada. I'm calling in today from the East Kootenays in Kimberley, BC. Brian and I, again, have worked together for the last couple of years, working to align Indigenous knowledge with Western science, specifically within the Foreshore Integrated Management Planning Protocol, which I will describe quite a bit in the next couple of slides. Brian, please feel free to speak to anything about your role within the project.
Yeah, okay. And then, so my role and my position gives me a spot here to work on some of these freshwater initiatives. Working with Living Lakes Canada is one of them. As well as Okanagan Nation Alliance and Loretta Aquatics, and it's all related to the water quality stuff. As you've been seeing in Nicola Lake, we've been experiencing extremes in Douglas Lake as well, and it just seems to be filtering down. So we're really trying to work with our experts to find out what's going on, and Living Lakes has been a great partnership in the last couple of years to help support some of this work.
Great, thank you, Brian. So yes, Living Lakes Canada, we have been coordinating foreshore integrated management planning projects since 2017. I will call them FIMP moving forward to save us some time. But they are a cumulative impact assessment tool or a survey that allows us to assess the cumulative impacts of human development and human land use on lake shorelines. We do so by establishing foreshore development guidance documents, which aim to conserve ecosystems, cultural integrity, climate resiliency, and to protect species of conservation concern around a lake. We do so by providing evidence-based best management practices to decision makers, stakeholders, rights holders, and shoreline property owners. Now, these surveys, we look at the 50-meter donut around a lake. So that is what the foreshore is when I use that term. We will perimeter the lake by boat. And in addition, we'll use GPS and drone assessments to record the entire foreshore. Now, we look at 28 different criteria when we do this. We look at habitat value, the type of substrate, the type of development that exists, whether it's a boathouse, a retaining wall, or a groin. We look at vegetation, wildlife, forestry, and then, of course, we use any existing data that already exists for that lake and for the surrounding land use to do a full inventory and a full survey of the lake's shoreline. Now, what we'll do then is we'll split the lake into different segments, and we'll plug in all of those criteria into the Foreshore Habitat Sensitivity Index. This is kind of the FIMP calculator, and it receives all of that criteria, and then it spits out a corresponding ranking for the habitat integrity or for the corresponding values for each segment of the lake. We then present all of this information in the Foreshore Development Guidance document. And that's really the tangible reference where decision makers or rights holders, property owners can view the specific values that a segment of the lake holds and whether or not development should or should not take place based on those values. Now, Brian and I got together to improve this pretty colonial process back in 2021. And we knew we needed to start with creating an additional framework or an additional document that would outline the steps for how we can make this process far more inclusive than it has been in the past. Historically, these foreshore surveys only looked at the ecological values of the shoreline and not the cultural and archaeological values as well. So Brian and I co-wrote the Local Indigenous Knowledge and Values Framework, along with our coworker, Claire Armstrong, and support from the University of British Columbia and the Sustainability Scholars Program. Now, the framework that we wrote is very much a how document. How can we align these two different knowledge sets in a federally developed protocol? And how can we better influence lake management and lake-related decision-making to be more inclusive and more holistic than it has been in the past? Now, this is a living document. It continues to adapt, but the first time it has been officially used was being applied to the Nicola Lake Shoreline Survey that took place in 2023. Now, the timing for this presentation aligns with the publishing and the release of the official reports and maps from this shoreline survey. Now, an incredibly important part about this framework is that it is guided by the foundational chaptique, or the oral story, of the 4 food chiefs. This is the oral story for Syilx Okanagan Nation of how food was provided to the people. Brian, did you want to say anything on this slide before I move forward?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting notion that this framework that we've developed here is quite unique to BC. And there's others that are really looking to see how they can apply similar notion in other lakes like Okanagan Lake, where there is foreshore development that is excelling, and the protections aren't in place for those. And it's a real struggle for people to figure out how to incorporate Indigenous knowledge in many of the faucets in BC government as well. So this is a unique framework that we're actually, as George has said, applying and adjusting as we learn as we go. So it's quite unique, I would say, in BC.
Absolutely. It's not only to support project leads such as Brian and myself, but to really support hired consultants, volunteers, field technicians who are doing the work as well. Like I said, it's not a why document. We know why this work is important. We know why this process needs to be more inclusive and evolved than it has been. But we really created, how can we do this? What are the steps to making this work happen and making this project successful? And so, like I said, we broke it down based on the 4 food chiefs. We identified that each of the project steps aligns closest with one of the 4 chiefs. Here you can see the traits that each of the 4 food chiefs is most closely associated with. Chief Bitterroot is most relationship oriented, it's inclusive, it really builds that foundation and trust. Chief Saskatoon is innovative, it's thinking outside of the box. Chief Black Bear is tradition oriented. It's keeping a place and an opportunity for the knowledge keeper and the teacher to be present and involved within the project. And then Chief Salmon is action oriented and efficient and pushes through barriers such as a salmon would. So again, Brian and I broke down the FIMP project process into 7 distinct steps: project planning, the place-based planning meeting, the assessment, which is the actual field work or the cultural assessment that takes place, the analysis of all of this information, the compilation of all of this information into a holistic report and a holistic map set, the implementation process, which is very much what we are doing now, sharing the work that we've done, sharing the lessons that we've learned and the recommendations that have come from this work and how it can better improve lake management strategies. And then, of course, project evaluation. How has this worked? What was challenging to us? How can we improve for future projects? And as Brian said, this work has already begun to spread. We are currently doing a similar survey on Douglas Lake. And in tandem in the Okanagan, Living Lakes Canada is working with the Okanagan Indian Band to reflect this project on Wood and Kalamaka Lake this year, and ideally Okanagan Lake next year. This is just a better visual of how we broke down those project phases and how we aligned them with the 4 food chiefs that they are most closely associated with. We identified a specific goal, a specific objective, and an ideal outcome for each project phase. So we can use the place-based planning meeting as an example. We felt that it most closely aligned with Chief Black Bear. The goal of this was to, again, interweave Indigenous and Western ways of learning, knowing, and understanding all living things. The objective was to identify opportunities that promote Indigenous teachings alongside Western ways of learning, and to ensure that these ways will be encouraged and sought out to improve the understanding of all living things related to Nicola Lake and its shoreline. And then, of course, the outcome that we wanted to see was that project members had a substantive understanding of both Indigenous and Western ways of learning, knowing, and understanding in a manner that enables the potential for interweaving these systems now during the project and beyond. And again, here's another example. This is taken directly from the local Indigenous knowledge and values framework. This is currently public and available on the Living Lakes Canada website. I can share all resources that are referenced today with council. But again, it represents or identifies the goal, the objective, and the outcome of this work and why we did it. Now, of course, we reflected this in every aspect of the project. It was very obvious to Brian and I that spending meaningful time on the land was an essential part of the work that we were doing here. These photos show the UBC students that contributed to the work and some of the additional volunteering and support we provided, and we supported Upper Nicola Band with. I think for Brian and myself, it was so important for us not only to work together on this project, but to really understand the initiatives of both Living Lakes Canada and Upper Nicola Band as a whole. We have prioritized relationship building from the start, and it continues to be the biggest priority for us moving forward. And for any other foreshore projects that are utilizing the local Indigenous knowledge and values framework, building trust and building a strong foundation just steeped in relationships really is the most important part of the work. Brian, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, and we found this a very key and unique piece to the work in developing that framework and in the consulting work after that. It was really an expression of being out on the land and having consultants come in and understand why it's important to us culturally. And I think a lot of local citizens can relate to this example as well, right? As expressing, you got to kind of see it to understand why we value it so much and why it's so important. So that really changes the preview and review that they do, and pay particular attention to certain key areas that we focus in on that is hard to tell from a map sometimes. And so really getting out there together, and building relationships was a key part of the progress or the project.
Wonderful. So I've placed some of the findings from the work that we've done since 2023. Now, I did describe earlier in the presentation how the ecological data is collected, but for the first time, we also coordinated, led by Upper Nicola Band, a cultural overview assessment of the Nicola Lake foreshore at the same time as the ecological data was being collected. So we interviewed multiple elders and knowledge keepers with the support of a consultancy called Kusan Research and Media. They interviewed and transcribed these interviews or these knowledge keepers, and uploaded the information to Upper Nicola Band's Community Knowledge Keepers database. So the information and the interviews that were conducted is held entirely in confidentiality by the band. Out of those interviews and out of that desktop research, 19 culturally sensitive areas were identified in various areas of the Nicola Lake foreshore. Now, these are presented on the same map set as the ecological values are, but Brian and I both decided that it was very important to keep those values confidential. So we have identified that there are culturally sensitive areas, but we have not gone into detail as to what those culturally sensitive areas are. We'll talk about that a little bit further in the presentation, but I wanted to recognize that up front. Now, what the Shoreline Survey has identified is that 51.3% of the Nicola Lake shoreline, which does make up 26.5 kilometers, can be considered natural and undisturbed or undeveloped. The remaining 48.7% can be considered disturbed or developed by human influence. Now, the proportion of natural shoreline decreased by 1%. This is 517 meters between the first shoreline survey that took place in 2011 and the resurvey that we've coordinated in 2023. Now, this is a 0.08% rate of loss, which is equivalent to the loss of 43 meters of natural shoreline per year. And as you can see on the graph to the right of the slide, the most common modification or the most common development that we saw were groins, which is pretty much a vertical retaining wall. Usually these are made up by shoreline property owners just by collecting large rocks along the shoreline. Now, unfortunately, this does disrupt a significant amount of riparian habitat and riparian vegetation. But the creation of groins was closely followed by docks, and then after that, retaining walls and mooring buoys were the most common modifications that were recorded. Additionally, the various segments of the lake were ranked, such as I described earlier in the presentation. 4.8% of the lake can be considered to hold very high habitat value or a very high ecological ranking. 46% is considered a high ecological ranking, followed by 44% at moderate, and then 4.5% of the lake foreshore can be considered to hold a low ecological ranking. The map shows you this quite closely. Typically, something that would be associated with a very high ecological ranking is a wetland area or a creek outlet. Those specific habitats or specific areas provide a lot of ecological value for fish, birds, invertebrates, reptiles and amphibians, and mammals. Here's an example of what the maps look like. This one does contain a culturally sensitive area. This is the west side of the lake. As you can see, we see the yellow band, which does recognize that the ecological value is listed as moderate. Now, again, at the top, we do have one of 19 culturally sensitive areas identified. And so the purpose here is when a development application is proposed for this specific segment of the lake, the direct example of why or why not this development should be approved is available and visual and in detail explained. Now, this provides the perfect opportunity for meaningful engagement and inclusive engagement with Upper Nicola Band. Any disturbance or development of this culturally sensitive area can be considered to violate Silk's law. Here is another example of these more holistic map sets. Again, this is the first time that a FIMP map has demonstrated both the cultural values and the ecological values of any foreshore in British Columbia. And this is out of around 30 different surveys that have occurred throughout the province since the 2010s. And again, this one recognizes zones of sensitivity, which I didn't describe in this presentation, just one of the many details of FIMP. But again, it recognizes that there is a fisheries-related zone of sensitivity, as well as multiple culturally sensitive areas identified. Brian, would you like to speak here at all?
Yeah, just so for reference, this is Coshannon Creek coming out, and that's the old sailing club kind of area there, right? So as you can see, we have culturally identified stuff there, but also as well as the importance of Coshannon Creek and the kokanee spawning and whatnot there. So
perfect. And again, we will be sending out a press release and publishing these map sets and these reports in the next week or so. So all of this will be available very quickly and very soon. And I will be sure to send along a link to the public versions of the documents in the coming days. Now, all of this work, both the cultural assessments and the ecological assessments, has resulted in a list of holistic recommendations for future Nicola Lake management. Again, to ensure that the 4 food chiefs were present throughout this project, we did organize these recommendations based on the chief, again, that they most closely aligned with. So we have, this is just an example. There are quite a few other recommendations in the reports. I've shown 2 here for each chief on this slide and the next. But again, we organized these recommendations based on those that were most relationship specific, tradition specific, innovation focused, and action focused recommendations. An example of them would be to further collaborate both all rights holders and decision makers around Nicola Lake to develop a term of reference for environmental and archaeological assessments that will occur in the future related to the Nicola watershed. A tradition-focused recommendation was that local First Nations should continue to share knowledge and tradition when appropriate, including the oral history of the 4 food chiefs with future projects such as this one. An innovation-focused recommendation included that nations and provincial government should use existing tools to consider and plan for the cumulative effects of climate change, shoreline development, invasive species, water withdrawal, and many of the other impacts that are facing the Nicola watershed. And finally, a action-focused recommendation included that constructions of marinas and or new concrete boat launches should be prohibited in any area of the Nicola Lake foreshore. These proposed developments do have much larger impacts on them to foreshore and riparian values. and should be highly discouraged in the future to protect Nicola Lake values. Brian, did you want to say anything before we wrap up for questions?
No, in the spirit of time, I think we'll just keep going.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you everybody for the time and for listening, and we are happy to accept any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Georgia. And Brian, questions from anyone? I guess the question that I've got here, Georgia and Brian, is we've looked at the, I guess we'll call that the north side of the lake. Now, we know there was some construction on the other side of the lake, on the Colchana side past the hotel. Is that something that's coming in the future, or is that just not anything of concern? I'm just wondering if we're going to see some work on that side of the lake.
So you say again, so the north side?
Well, you know, when you go past the Colchana Hotel, there was quite a lot of development there years ago. There's homes and everything along there as well. And I just noticed in this report, we've just covered the far side of the lake and down by the old Colchana Golf Course. I'm just wondering if there's going to be some work past that, or is that just land that was not considered that was causing it, or there could be any issues there. I'm just wondering if we're going to include that, or is that something in the future on that side of the lake?
It is included, just for time purposes. We
Okay.
didn't include it. We just showed that one example to highlight a CSA in that area as well. So it encompasses all the development around the whole lake.
Okay.
Doesn't really project into the future of any potential, but it does put in a process in place where if new development comes into play and they want to develop on their foreshore,
Yep.
This new consideration framework has to be in place. Albeit the FIMP, it only does, is it 50 meters, Georgia, up the shoreline?
Yeah. From the high water mark to 50 meters upland.
So that's all it's encompassing, right? So anything above that is out of scope for this kind of work.
Okay. No, I appreciate it. I was just wondering if there was more that we hadn't seen, but I understand under the time constraints, we didn't see it all. So I do appreciate that. Any other questions, Council, at all? Thank you for all the work you've done. And Brian will have to have another coffee, and you can fill me in on that. And maybe I could take a tour out there and you can walk me through the whole thing. I'd appreciate it if you could do that. I would enjoy that. So thank you very much for all the hard work as usual, Brian, and nice to meet you both. And thank you, Georgia, for explaining everything to us. And you know, I really appreciate when we can see this kind of stuff. And you know, this helps as we work towards you know, memorandum of understanding. And really pleased to have had you present tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Yes, and thank you, Council, for your time and listening. Have a good night and enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Unfinished business, 8.1. OCP Amendment Bylaw number 2377-2024 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 2378-2024. We have several recommendations, so we'll just do the first one. A recommendation that Council gives third reading to the Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 2377-2024. Councilor Petrosi, Councilor Egan, any questions on this? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Recommendation that Council adopts Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 2377-2024. Councilor Etchart, Councilor Egan, any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? None. Recommendation that Council gives third reading to the Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 2378-2024. Councilor Egan, Councilor Baxter, any questions on this one? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Recommendation that Council adopt Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 2378-2024. Councilor Ogan. Councilor Charney, thank you. Any questions on this one? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. 8.2, City of Merritt 2024-2028 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 2370. We have a recommendation that Council adopts City of Merritt 2024-2028 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw number 2370-2024. Councilor Etchart, Councilor Baxter, any questions on this one? Councilor Charney.
Okay, I do have concern. I can't find it in my agenda right now. I have concern because it says bylaw. And I know we discussed it in the October 22nd meeting, but a bylaw is a legally binding document. And my concern is if we do pass this without discussing all our financial individual concerns, we're passing something that may come back to bite us in the future. That's my concern about the thing. And I also have a concern when I look at the 2024 taxation, net taxation, and then the 2025 net taxation. That's a 19.7% increase in net taxation. I'm a little concerned about that. So I don't, this is great information, and I think we need this information, but I'm very concerned about using a bylaw to pass this information on to us. Maybe I need some information from staff to clarify this.
CEO, CFO? CFO or CEO?
Yeah, so ultimately it is a bylaw because it's an amendment to your budget bylaw. Right? Like you can't, our budget is a bylaw, so to amend it, we must amend it with another bylaw. And that is the legal way in which it is done. So for us to take that money and reallocate it to these issues that we couldn't have dealt with otherwise, we essentially have to amend the bylaw with a bylaw. And you have to approve that.
But this does not set our budget rates.
Not setting rates. This is related to things we could not have anticipated in the budget, right? Because budgets, we can't always stick within the budget if there's something that happens that's outside, like the fire hall getting hit by lightning. Can't anticipate that, right? And it's a significant amount of work because we can't go to insurance. And so those are the kinds of things that we will come as an amendment to council for, to show that we're reporting to you, we're understanding it, we're taking money from one source to another to offset these additional costs, right? When we set the original budget bylaw, this was our anticipated costs. These are our unexpected situation. And now we have to amend that bylaw in order to, for when it get audited, the council, it's council's bylaw on ensuring that we are spending the money appropriately.
So my concern is, I understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
My concern is, all of a sudden we get something presented to us that, you know, is at considerable cost. And we're saying, oh, will you pass that in that bylaw? So that's my only concern. If things get lumped into a sum that we haven't really discussed, it's a lump sum expenditure, and we're not aware of the individual expenditures.
I believe in the briefing note, we were given the individual expenditures.
Not on this, we haven't. Oh, that one sheet, that proposed sheet.
Yeah.
But that was very broad again. That was
no,
not
I think
specific.
that the briefing note that you were provided at, can you bring up that briefing note, Seal? Indicated this was what, this amount of money was for the fire hall repairs. This amount of money was for the loss of revenue, for the unanticipated loss of revenue, or we didn't meet our revenue goals. What was some of the other things, CFO? Oh, the well pump station just becoming non-functional and having to do all those significant repairs, right? These are things we can't budget for, because if we held this money in the budget, you're right, taxation increase would be incredible if we just held this much contingency in the budget. So if we're holding $400,000 or $500,000 of contingency funds in the budget, then you're right, that's another 5% tax increase. 4 to 5% tax increase. So we want to make sure that we're not holding those contingencies. So when we have unexpected spending, council has to approve, we have to come back and approve. This is us justifying that spending. So when it comes to an audit, the auditors aren't saying, well, where did you make council aware of this? We make council aware of it by amending the bylaw, right? We can't come to you and say, oh my God, can we fix the pump station? We think it'll be $500,000 when we don't really know, right? And it's an emergency that has to happen. So we have to amend a bylaw with a bylaw. And when we did this, we provided you with the amount of costs for each of those things. Right? So every time there was like a unexpected expense, that's what this amendment is for. So that when we get audited, our bylaw aligns with what we've spent and we've justified what we've been able to spend.
So how do we go on a 19.7% increase in net taxation?
This comes out of this extra funds is coming out of reserves.
For the last time this year.
Well, ideally, unless we have another disaster, right? We can't, that's why you have to have reserves, because if there's a disaster and it's not in the operating budget, it has to come from the bank, right? It has to come out of your savings account. Just like if your truck motor explodes, right? Can't fix it if it's not in the savings account.
Okay.
So that's how, we budget. The idea is we're budgeting and we're getting to a place where we want to budget where we don't have to operate out of our savings account. But if there's a disaster, something completely unexpected that we can't foresee, that savings account is our place to go. Right? And so when you don't have money in savings, very hard to deal with the disasters.
Councillor Chair.
I understand Councillor Journey's concerns, and luckily, because we do a bylaw every year for the 5-year plan, that's our chance to review. And I do see where she's coming from with the increase, but this is where we have to acknowledge there was the 9 expenses where we removed the 1, and that's where we had addressed that. That's where we had discussed it, even though it's not mentioned here. But I do understand the concerns, and that's where, of course, we're approving this because of the unforeseen expectations. We couldn't go to insurance because after the major flood that we had in 2021, our deductible was too high, so it's considered uninsured. So we couldn't access because the deductible was higher than the amount of loss. So for small claims, you have to pay for it out of our pocket, out of our savings. In this case, we have to make the plan amendment. And that's why unexpected, unforeseen loss is what it's known in insurance world. And so I'm comfortable with this because we'll review this again next year. Anyway, thanks.
Actually,
sorry, Councillor Hogan.
Yeah, no. Thank you. Thank you for the information. And it's clear to me. My concern is that I see in this amended budget some transfers from reserves and surpluses to balance some budget items. I was under the understanding that we were going to go with the tax increase for 2024 for that specific percentage to avoid these transfers. So I hope that one day we won't be relying on these transfers because we cannot operate like that. So I was hoping that, okay, then it's going to be a bigger impact on the residents on taxation, but we will have enough taxation revenue to be able to operate without touching those reserves. Now that I can see that we are still doing that, that's a big concern for me because we are still continuing doing that. Our goal is for 2025, perhaps not to touch it. So there is going to be unexpected things, but we have to, allocate for contingency.
And so one of the things that we're looking at, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please.
Sorry, I jumped in there very quickly.
Not a problem.
Is that when we set out the budget last year, the idea was that this 2024 year would be the last year that we would budget using reserves for operating budget, right? So we don't want to. So previously, for many years, as far back as we can see, the cities relied on our reserve funds to operate because of a low taxation, right? Because of lack of raising of taxes. In fact, at one point, somebody reduced the taxation level in the last 10 years, right? Inflation didn't stop, so I don't know why one would reduce taxation. But what we want to do, and this was the year where we had said this year, 2024, is going to be the last year we use any transfer to budget operationally at the beginning of the year to operate the organization. 2025, with that 12% tax increase that we had suggested at the beginning of last year's process, 12% 2024, 12% 2025, that was recommended by the CFO, we would then be relying completely on taxation and user fees for our operational budget. We'd no longer be pulling from reserve. The point of reserve is exactly right. When we have infrastructure that collapses, we need to have money in reserve. And sometimes that is the fire hall gets hit by lightning. Like, what are the chances, right? So $50,000 comes out of reserve because we have to deal with that. Or there, a sinkhole opens up in the city and our dump truck falls in, right? You have to have money in the bank in reserve to pull forward to deal with those unexpected issues. So the goal being that in 2024, we still pulled money from reserves to operate, with the outlook that by 2025, we would not be operating with reserve funds. We would be operating with operational only funds. So what we'll get to is that in 2026, again, we won't be planning to use reserves for operation. We will be planning to use reserves for capital projects or unexpected disasters that we can't anticipate as part of the budget process. We also don't want to be keeping too much in contingency in our operation budget, because that money sits there and might not get used, where it makes better sense for us to come back to you later and say, we have a $100,000 budget that we need, or $100,000 item we need you to approve us taking this out of reserve. Right. And so that's kind of the process where instead of holding money in the budget and using what could be in the reserves to do that, we're cleaning that out and we're saying reserves are reserves. They're used for planned capital projects like the wastewater treatment plant or things that could not possibly be anticipated, and we need to pull them out of reserve because there's no way we could have budgeted for them. So if we keep that budget lean and we ask for the unexpected instead of having it in there and holding it there in case it might someday happen, and for 20 years it's been sitting in there, right? We're able to say this money's going in reserve. It's making money for us. It's making interest. If we don't use it, we don't use it. It's there. It's safe. Does that make sense?
I think the plan last year, and I think it was conveyed several times, that we would be doing one more year, 2024, of doing the process to be kind of free of that in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that. Councillor Egan, you had your light on. Do you have anything? You got to put your mic on. No problem.
Again, I'm just wondering where you're getting all. Was this just a incremental percentage increases over the next few annual budget years, or these actual numbers?
When we proposed last year, 2-year plan as part of this budget cycle, we proposed a 2-year plan to sort of get out of the red and be in the black. In that, we're not going to use our savings account. If we do a 12% increase in 2024 with an anticipated 12% increase in 2025, we would no longer have to take money out of our savings to operate our daily operations for the organization. And that was the proposal. And so these things that we're asking for the amendment for are the kinds of things we should be going to reserve for, because we could never have budgeted for them. And we don't want to sit on money in our operational fund that increases people's taxes because we're sitting on money we may or may not use. Right?
Well, I don't think you answered my question.
Well, I don't know what numbers, like I'm just making up some numbers.
Scheduling.
CFO?
Would you like to see?
No, I can't.
No glasses.
Oh, I do have my glasses here. What am I doing? Go ahead. Schedule A.
Microphone. I'm sorry.
General ledger accounts.
Right. Is it a projected percentage going up every year, or are those real numbers?
Those have been customized with each individual director. So there's no broad percentages that manage an individual line. It's
okay, and then when we get to the doing the actual budget, these are the numbers that we have to work towards meeting for revenue and expenditures.
So the base of Schedule A is our original budget, and then we've amended certain things that were presented in the report. The amendment has to balance either through reserves or taxation. For the bylaw to be legal, it has to balance to zero at the end.
Right.
That is not council's final answer on 2025 taxation. You have two bylaws that have to be passed by May 14th. So there's the financial plan bylaw, and then there's the tax rate bylaw. And those have to be the same, they have to be tied. And council has to agree to both. So while we're communicating issues and we're saying we're probably not going to have the sale of services revenue and things like that, for the amending bylaw to be legal, it has to balance. And so, yes, that issue has been reflected in higher taxation. That is not council's final answer on 2025. The financial plan that will start progressing in December and the eventual tax rate bylaw have to be in sync, and they have to be agreed by council. Both need to be concurrent at that time. So we're making you aware of issues, and we will progress an updated plan for 25 through 29, and that'll have to be synced with the tax rate bylaw at the same time. Both need to be passed by May 14th.
Okay.
Both have to go together to be legal documents.
So,
Councilor Hogan.
Sorry.
thank you. So, how are we gonna be dealing with the unexpected expenses in 2025?
So they will come, those things will come to you as amendments to the bylaw and may, depending on, you know, depending on general revenue, you know, we could have a new person come to town and build a giant plant, and we might get more revenue than we expected or that we budgeted for because we didn't know they were going to build a giant plant in 2025. You know, there's that possibility that general revenue will offset. But ultimately, there's a chance that those critical things may come out of reserve because that's what reserve is for. It is for the things we can't budget for that are the big ticket items. You know, $5,000, probably not going to come out of reserve. Vote Street well replacement, that needs to come out of reserve. Right? Because we don't hold that in operational funds. So that has to come out of reserve. And that actually is the point of reserves, is to deal with those large capital things that need to get dealt with. Ideally, we're dealing with them. The problem is that we're not, because we're not dealing or haven't been dealt with, these infrastructure issues haven't been dealt with or properly funded for years across the country, right? There's infrastructure that the federal government turned over to the provinces and the provinces turned over to municipalities that there was no plan for, no financial plan for. And so that's the situation we're in right now, is that across the country, 70-year-old infrastructure, nobody financially planned for it. And so we have to have a good reserve fund, but sometimes our plan doesn't work because we're anticipating fixing something in 5 or 6 more years and we need to fix it tomorrow. That money needs to come out of reserve. But ultimately, we want to be in a position where we know that we have enough money going in, that we're transferring money to reserves, we have enough money sitting in the bank that if there is an unexpected situation, it's okay to take it out of reserves because we're in a good position. But we're not right now, but there's no place else to take that money out of, right? Like.
Thank you. Councilor Cherney.
Please correct me if I'm wrong. I thought that we increased our parcel taxes by 25%. Or was it water, sewer, and utility? Which one did we increase by 25%? And that money was to go into reserves. Did that money go into reserves and did it stay in reserve?
So we did increase the parcel tax by 5%, and we increased the water and sewer, like the utilities costs, by 25%, because currently we are funding our water and sewer from reserves. So our operating costs, we're about $700,000 undercharging for services in water and sewer. And so those deficits, the lack of revenue in that department means that we have to take that money out of somewhere else. So it goes to taxation, right? Or it comes out of reserve. So that's where we're in the situation where we haven't been selling our services at an appropriate cost. And so as a result, we're operating with money from our reserve funds instead of being cost recovery. So that money intentions of saying, okay, well, that 25%, that's to operate because we're not charged, or we raise taxes by exponential numbers, right? So CFO, if you have some clarification on that.
Councillor Turner, you had your letter?
Old age, maybe. I thought that 25% increase was to go into reserves. I thought that was the original intent of the increase.
The parcel tax. So what used to happen is that they would take the parcel tax and use that to operate. Whereas that parcel tax originally was meant to fund the repair and replacement of water and sewer infrastructure. So instead of putting that money in the bank, which we are now doing, the parcel tax is now going into reserve based on your last bylaw, your 2024 bylaw. That money's going into reserve now. And with a 5% increase year over year is what the last bylaw was. The 25% for utilities, we have to raise that because we're no longer using parcel tax to pay for operating. Right? And that's where the imbalances are, is this money, parcel taxes are meant to be able to fund replacement and repair costs. And we've been using them up until this last year as an operating fee. Whereas,
so the 25% increase, did that bring us up to a level where we are now paying for the we are still behind the 8 ball?
Quite a bit. Almost $700,000.
Well, I'll tell you, when I came in 2008, we had to raise the water and sewer tax almost 200% because it had been same thing happened, and we were so far behind. It took us many years to dig our way out. So, Councillor Egan.
Yeah, thank you. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding now after all this conversation that we want to approve this bylaw amendment, which will allow us to make amendments to the financial plan as we move along and as necessary.
So this amendment is based on the things we need to change right now based on the things that have happened. So if between now and December 31st, something else comes up, we will amend the bylaw again.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for all that. 9.1, Canada Day grant application. We have a recommendation that council directs staff to submit a Canada Day grant application from the Department of Canadian Heritage before November 21st, 2024 grant deadline. Councillor Egan, Councillor Petrosi, any questions on that? There's a thing in your package. All those in favor? Opposed? We love free money. 9.2, request for council's support growing e-petition signatures and new flood mitigation project website. Hold on a second. Oh, Councillor Baxter, Councillor. Yep.
Information piece. Not actually needs.
Oh, my mistake. Sorry. 9.2.
Yeah. So it's very informational, but it's interactive for you.
We will accept it as information. Mr. Strang, go ahead, please.
Hello. I just came, somebody told me there was cookies. That's basically it. We have a new flood mitigation website. We've kind of soft launched it at this point. I'm not sure if any of you have had a chance to check it out, but please do. We're pretty quickly adding content and getting all the different construction updates and whatnot. But I just wanted to talk to you a little about becoming door-to-door salesman. That is going to be my request to Mayor and all of Council. As many of you know, we have a federal e-petition that we are looking for as many signatures as possible. And obviously, there's a level of signatures that we will get some exposure at the federal table in order for our MP to talk to Parliament about our financial situation and get them to make good on their promise that they would help us with flood recovery and mitigation. But the more signatures that we can get on that, the better off we are. So we've kind of set this up so that the The core of the period is right now when we're kind of during the atmospheric river season, the, of course, anniversary of the flood, et cetera, et cetera. I have a bunch of cards and I would really ask council, hopefully most or all of you will be at the bridge opening this weekend. And so bridge opening, day-to-day things you're at, please hand these out. There is one side of it is flood.merit.ca, just kind of talking a little bit about the webpage, and the other side talks about the e-petition. And actually, if you go to flood.merit.ca, it's very clear right on the front page, click here to sign. So rather than typing in ourcommons.ca/petition/en blah, 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 you just go to flood.merit.ca and you can click through and sign the petition. So I'm going to leave these here. There's a bunch of cards here. And so if everyone would like to take a handful, or whoever's comfortable, take a handful, I would really appreciate all of council passing them out. And yeah, I'm hoping to see most or all at the bridge event opening. It's basically done. I think they're painting lines and putting up handrails and we're good to go.
And so I just wanted to thank the director and his team for this, because I think in particular, not just the e-petition, but the website is super important, because we're going to see the bridge open, which is a huge win for us. Like, wow, right? This bridge has been out, it's there, it's so symbolic for the community. But the issue is that we're going to come to a point where we don't have the resources to continue to move these along. But we need people to see that we're still getting wins along the way. And we have been since day one with recovery, right? With the small things that people probably don't even remember. And so all of that is now highlighted. All of the work and time that's been spent on recovery in the community is now highlighted specifically on this website, with each project having a bit of a summary of what happened and when it was completed and things like that. So people might start to feel like we're slowing down. And we might, because we might be continuing to fight the funding. But as soon as we have money, we're going to be doing projects that we can fund along the way, right? Sean has it all broken down. And it's really important for people to have that website to look at. And I think, you know, listening to Samaritan's Purse tonight, because some of this is the mental health recovery, to see that this community is moving forward, and the mayor and council and the staff are continuing to support protection and recovery efforts.
Yeah, I think it is important. A lot of the stuff that we do is not super visible, which is good, because that means it's not on fire, and or flooding, or it's going properly. But I mean, we already have over $10 million in projects queued up for next year, for next construction season, another $10 million the year after. So we're planning out 3 years in advance. And I think we just, need a mechanism to let our community know all the fruits of labor of all of the people that have been involved. And I will say I can't take credit for any of this, but thank you. We certainly have some fantastic communication people within the city, and then Diana on the flood mitigation team is really pushing hard on this too. So
thank you.
Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We'll be sure to get those out. 9.3, 2024 Community Resilience Investment Program Funding Reallocation. We have a recommendation that council supports the reallocation of unspent community resiliency investment funding towards offsetting fire smart position costs. Councillor Etchart, Councillor Egan, any questions on this? The information is in your package. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 9.4, Council Policy Review Committee recommendation from October 24th, 2024. The following recommendation is forwarded from the October 24th, 2024 Policy Review Committee for consideration by Council. Recommendation that country artist murals in the city center pilot policy is rescinded. I have no idea why that took so long for me to get out. Councillor Etchart, Councillor Ogan, any questions on this? Just want to thank the Policy Committee for digging through that, getting that done. Appreciate it. That's great of you to do so. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Yeah. Notice of motion. I'm not sure this is a notice of motion, but maybe this is a notice of information. I met with the Country Christmas group earlier this week, and they're running into some issues. They're not sure they can continue to maintain the price of using the Civic Center. And if they do it this year, they will have no funds to get through the summer. What I would like council to think about is possibly we throw, because Country Christmas is so important to the community and it's been here so long, that maybe we move this into a line item as an in-kind for the use for 1 week for the Civic Center. The only reason I'm bringing this up is we are coming very close to it now. And I would like to be able to possibly have council's input on this and maybe get this. I know this, Kevin is looking at me like he wants, but I'm just saying, I think we need to look at it because this is one event we do not want to lose in the community. And I think we have to help it out. So it's not really notice of motion. It's okay.
Included in 2024, we will have to bring a bylaw amendment for the council budget bylaw. So it is a notice of motion.
But the only problem is if we can't talk about this until the next meeting. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So, but we can do some research for you to tell you what amount you might want to include.
It will be, I guess it'll be my notice of motion, and I will leave that in the capable hands of our team here.
You can't just,
no, we can't discuss it till next meeting.
So we'll bring you, now we know that, we'll bring you briefing so we can give you like some prices and things like that.
Well, again, we'll probably see what it's processes, right? What should have happened is, I guess it should have happened sooner, but it didn't. So I'm just going on the timeline of working with their group. We just met 3 days ago. So we'll see what we can do, and I don't know. We'll see what we can do. I don't think so. That wouldn't be a good idea because we got to figure it all out because it's an in-kind, right? So let them work on it. Let's just we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Any other crazy notices of motion other than my own? Reports from council. Councillor Baxter.
Hi. On October 27th to the 30th, I went to the Intentional Transformation Conference in Victoria. I found it interesting and there's some ideas, but I'm not sure what we can do about the homeless and living rough. And then November 1st, I went to the SILGA conference in Kelowna with Mr. Owen. It was good, interesting. And then November 11th, Remembrance Day ceremony, which I got to lay the wreath with my son. That was so exciting, and he's still talking about it.
Thank you. Councillor Charney, you have your list mailed to you.
Yeah. Forgot to type it out. October 30th, I went to the Transit AGM meeting as Councillor Baxter was in Victoria. I think they have a little concern as to how this regionalization will take place. On the 31st, I went to asset management, and I found that very interesting. I enjoyed the session, and my main getaway from that was that asset management is a living document that is readable and user-friendly, a process with a means to an end, and it supports good governance, accountability, and transparency. And that meeting, I also found out that our CAO has a friend who has a lot of concerns very similar to what we have, and that friend actually is a friend of the mayor also. So this friend was brought up a couple of times. November 7th, I attended the Age Friendly and Accessibility Committee. I think this committee is going to do a really good job. I think we're trying to get past just making recommendations and then they get shelved. I think they're really trying to push to get actual things done. So kudos to the people that attend that. November 11th, I attended the Remembrance Day ceremony here in town. And it was nice to see the number of people that we had in attendance. And that's it.
So for myself, October 31st, I did the same asset management. It was interesting to see other views and how that works. November 2nd, I went to the Sense Icebreaker. It was really well attended. It's a completely different team this year. We went 5 straight wins. We had 1 loss. And this weekend they did 3 straight wins. We're 3rd overall in the entire division, which is amazing for an expansion team. So if you get the time to come and see the Centennials, take the time to do it. November 5th, there was the Stuix Rewilding Group, met again. As a de facto, I get to sit on the council, but I don't make any decisions or anything like that. I just listen. So it's nice to see them moving in that direction. November 6th and 7th, TNRD budget and regular meetings. And yes, TNRD budget. There's a hair puller. 27 different communities trying to figure out a budget. It's quite interesting. November 8th, I met with the kind of the new Citizens on Patrol group. They are becoming legitimized at some point in time. They're very close to it. And they want the city to be approving them. And I said we would when they become completely legitimate through CPO and the RCMP. We can't do that until they do that. So, and they understand and they're working towards it. So, November 8th, I met with the Country Christmas Group, which I just mentioned. November 9th, met with Mako, and we had a very quick lunch meeting. They brought some stuff down for the Diwali celebration for the staff, and I handed that out to all the buildings. It was just some treats and chocolate and stuff. And we talked about the future of the building. They want to be building by December and up and running in March. That's where they want to be. There's some other plans that they are making as far as a job fair, and we'll work. We let them know that we'll work on that with them as we move along. November the 11th, I was out at Chalouse, laid the wreath out there. I want to thank Councillor Baxter for filling in for me here. We got absolutely soaked, and but it was well done. First time I've actually seen the new cenotaph out there, and it's really well done, really nice. November 16th, coming this Saturday, of course, is the opening of the bridge. I do my walk starting at 8, and then we get to the bridge, and looking forward to all attending that because it's pretty exciting. So it's nice to see us get that across the line. So it's been basically it will be to the year 3 years to the day that we actually fell in, and 1 year to the day we actually got the funding, and now it's going to be open. So it's pretty exciting. Anyone else? Oh, Councillor Rogan didn't see you.
Thank you. October the 30th, I attended an in-person session in Lytton, again, as part of the Lytton Business Recovery. November 1st, I attended the SILGA session. It was very informative. It's also good to understand how big municipalities versus small municipalities handle their management assets. So that was good. On November 6th, I attended the TNB monthly meeting. And November 11th, here in town, the Remembrance Day event.
Wasn't that busy over the last couple of weeks, but we did have a policy committee meeting on October the 24th, the 29th. We had the special council meeting. On November the 11th, I went out to the Indigenous services out at the Lower Nickel Indian Band, and that was the first time I'd seen their new cenotaph as well. And it's a beautiful site, and it was well attended. And yeah, it did rain. I didn't quite last the whole time because I was getting so no umbrella, bad planning. Yeah, it was great. Pretty good couple of weeks. Thank you very much.
That's Richard.
Yeah, quieter last couple of weeks. The 25th, I went to the SILGA board meeting. We're discussing lots of different issues. Report from youth being at UBCM and how we can encourage the younger generation maybe to get involved in the local politics scene. Balin Society meeting, kind of seeing a lot of the concerns from seniors in town and what we can do for safety and housing issues. And I went to the Remembrance Day session here in town, which was great. And I saw Councillor Baxter and her son putting the wreath, and the different committees and people that can get involved. I know like there's a museum AGM on Thursday and probably other things that I'm missing, but yeah, lots to come up. Country Christmas soon and the bridge opening. Thanks.
Oh, one thing I forgot to do was my gas buddy, so I'll do it. Oh dear. So Vancouver today, 166.9 was the low, 172.9 is the high. Kamloops, 151.9 is the low, and 161.9 is the high. Princeton, 151.9 is the low, 153.9 is the high. Cranbrook, 149.9 is the low, and 159.9 is the high. Merritt, 156.4 is the low, and 157.9 is the high. So the winner is Cranbrook at 149.9. Information Oh, sorry.
At the ceremony, they released the pigeons. There's one lonely little pigeon still flying around all by himself.
Ours got blown way over to the arbor and they took refugee on the roof. They didn't go anywhere. It was really windy when they let them go.
Today we were sitting on like, there's a white pigeon. So I think he didn't get home.
Oh, he'll make it way back. Information items. We have anything there that perks anybody's interest? One thing you'll notice is the letter of support with our delinquent taxes seems to be hitting a mark with just about everybody. Unfortunately, it's a little disappointing that the minister is unaware of that this is actually happening. So I guess we'll have to continue to push that as we move forward. It's because you saw the response, which was no response or a confused response. I'm not sure which one it was, but I think we'll continue to keep pushing with that so we can actually get the delinquent tax situation and get that money in our account where it belongs. Seal.
I just wanted to touch on a couple of quick things. One, on Saturday in Fort Smith in the Northwest Territories, gas was $1.61.
Wow.
So, we always think the cost of living in the North is so much higher. It's not. It's not. I was quite surprised when I got down here and it was still in the 50s. I was like, oh, that seems terrible. Just to give council a quick update, since many of you went to the asset management seminar from Silga, an update that we have gotten our current asset, tangible asset list into the software. I think we've balanced everything. We've done some problem solving. Everything's looking good. We're going to be starting phase 2 of our asset management project shortly, which is developing the asset management plan, which is a document that councils the big document where we talk about level of service, risks, investment levels, condition assessments of different assets and where we're at. So 2016, I think maybe council might remember I referred to the 2016 document, which said we should have been putting $5 million a year into our reserves in order to be able to pay for our required capital investments. Obviously that didn't happen. So we'll see what the new document brings us in 2025. I'm a little bit nervous, but ultimately we're not the only place in this condition, obviously. And I also want to say Sense Games, my son got to play in the little mini game at one of their last home games. So I think that's a really wonderful thing that the Sense are doing, and the kids in the U9 and U7 group really love it. So
Sense are doing well for an expansion team. It's impressive. I'm very impressed. So yep, we can. Yep, let's go offline with that. So we stay 5 minutes after? Okay. Terminated, we'll stay for 4 or 5 minutes after. We'll have to get everybody to clear. Take 5 minutes.
I made a care package.